Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll hear music from Blue Red Roses. But first, joining me now is our guest, Dr. Donald Johnson, Associate Professor at NDSU of History and author of the acclaimed book, Occupied America, British Military Rule and the Experience of Revolution. Dr. Johnson, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Before we get to your book, tell the folks a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, where you're originally from.
Sure. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., in Maryland, and I received I did my graduate training at Northwestern University in Chicago, and I've been here in Fargo and at NDSU for almost 8 years now. Kind of coming up to teach this stuff at NDSU. I kind of got interested in the Revolution and early American history more generally, just kind of growing up around the Capitol. My mother was a school teacher, so we didn't have a ton of money growing up, and so a lot of what we did for fun over the summer was kind of go downtown and see monuments and museums and things like that. And that really kind of gave me the history bug to go on and explore this a little bit more.
Yeah, Washington, D.C. can do that for you,
Absolutely.
to anybody. But, we're close to July 4th as we are talking here, and your specialty being colonial America. Again, was that what sparked your interest in that, was growing up around D.C. and all that?
Yeah, I mean, first growing up around D.C. and then specifically kind of on the book, which is about military occupation in the American Revolution. That I started writing it in graduate school, and it was around the time of kind of the height of the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan in the United States. And it kind of got me thinking about different circumstances and the ways that different populations react to civil wars and revolutionary movements and hostile military occupations. And it just got me thinking kind of as I read more and more about the revolutionary time period, that no one had really studied exactly what happened kind of with the British military occupations, at least in a systemic way. And so I wanted to kind of look at how the experience of military occupation during the 8 years of war, 1775 through 1783, and how that kind of shaped Americans' political consciousness and changed their opinions in both directions about the British Empire and the revolutionary movement.
Well, and again, a lot of people just look at July 4th as a holiday, but maybe
Right.
we should think about what it's all about. So what really led the American Revolution, and what did Great Britain specifically do to sort of alienate the colonists?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is taxation. That's kind of the textbook answer, right? Is the idea that there were taxes that were levied on the colonists by Great Britain, specifically by the Parliament, which was seeking to kind of recoup some war debt from a previous struggle, the French and Indian War. And the simplest answer is that American colonists resented these taxes, kind of remonstrated against them for about a decade, and when peaceful measures didn't work, they resorted to kind of more radical ideas and eventually armed protest and rebellion. The more complicated story is how the colonies fit into the British Empire more generally. The British Empire was founded on an idea, and we kind of think of this as a little bit counterintuitive today, where we think of the Revolution as this struggle of kind of liberalism or republicanism against a tyrannical empire. In fact, in the 18th century, Great Britain and the British Empire was one of the freest societies on earth. It was governed ever since 1688 by a constitutional monarchy, one that still stands today. And the problem was representation. The problem was that Parliament was levying taxes like the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the Townshend duties, and eventually the tea tax, without going through what many colonists saw as proper constitutional channels. The idea being that under the British system, Parliament could only levy taxes if people were represented in that body. And Americans, did not have representation in Parliament. And so a lot of the arguments, and we kind of tend to simplify this as American colonists saying, well, we don't want to pay any taxes. What you actually see from a lot of, especially the early revolutionary leaders, is arguments that says, we're willing to pay these taxes. We're willing to, do whatever we need to do to contribute to the upkeep of the empire. But we want to do it in ways that are decided by our legislators. So essentially they're saying, send us the bill and we'll figure out how to pay it, but don't kind of impose these duties and taxes on us externally.
Can you talk a little bit about, not everybody was for the revolution. So some of the colonists obviously probably wanted to remain with Britain.
Absolutely. I mean, the classic estimate is John Adams wrote in 1776 that around a third of the population was gung-ho for independence or for revolution. About a third of the population could swing either way. And then about a third of the population was fundamentally loyalist, wanted to remain with Great Britain. A lot of these people were folks whose livelihoods depended on the empire. What became the United States was an integral part of a transatlantic and even kind of worldwide British economy. There were goods, transshipped from New York that came from India, that came from China, that came from South America and the Caribbean, as well as from Europe. And a lot of the people, especially in port cities and especially kind of those with mercantile interests, were very invested in that and worried that independence or a prolonged rebellion would interrupt those trade links and that kind of economic prosperity. The other main element of it was, and more historians are demonstrating now, was kind of a cultural and religious aspect. A large proportion of colonial Americans were Anglicans, and the head of the Anglican Church is the King or Queen of England. And so many of them saw kind of a rebellion against the monarch as kind of a rebellion against the head of their church, and against their religious faith. And then, finally, the American colonists, even up through 1775, 1776, saw themselves as fundamentally British, and kind of culturally as well as politically, and many didn't want to give up that link to the mother country.
Yeah. And of course, still intrigued with royalty as they're doing today.
Exactly.
Right. Talk about the Declaration of Independence just a little
Sure.
bit. Why the importance of it, even though Britain still occupied America at the time?
Yeah, I mean, and the importance is kind of because there were British troops and kind of a lot of British power remaining in North America. So the revolution actually, it begins early in 1775, over a year before the Declaration of Independence is actually ratified by the Continental Congress. It begins kind of with these sporadic regional battles. Lexington and Concord in April of 1775 is kind of the big one. But there's also skirmishes in Virginia and South Carolina and New Hampshire, New York City, and everywhere. And for about a year, it was nearly a local affair. The Continental Congress existed and was trying to coordinate things and certainly built up institutions like the Continental Army, which is formed in the summer of 1775. But there was no clear kind of unified resistance, at least at the kind of intercolonial level. What there were local revolutionary committees and statewide, or at the time kind of colony-wide congresses and conventions that were kind of governing local areas and beginning to remove British officials from power. But there needed to be kind of a larger coordinating effort from above. The other part of it was there needed to be a state. The British colonies in rebellion didn't have as much standing as they would as an independent country. And so in order to seek help, for example, from potentially friendly powers like France and Spain and Russia and the Netherlands, the Continental Congress decided that they needed to define kind of their own agenda as a nation-building project, as kind of an independent nation, which would make it easier kind of diplomatically for these other countries, which were rivals of Great Britain and were anxious to kind of put a stick in their eye, that the United States was actually kind of a country and that it wouldn't go on and kind of just go back to Great Britain once the war was done.
Yeah, and with that, how did the colonial army defeat Britain? Of course, when you think about it, they had to be the underdog and would think that they didn't have the superior military strength.
They absolutely did not. And at no point in the war did the Continental Army or colonial forces ever have, either a numerical or certainly a training advantage over the British Army. The British Army coming out of the French and Indian War was one of the, if not the most fearsome fighting force in the world. What the revolutionaries were able to do was adopt a very specific strategy of avoiding major battles. It's what military historians call kind of a Fabian strategy, where essentially the goal is to keep the army as intact as possible and in the field. And the idea being that the British Army, which was 1,000 miles from home, undersupplied, increasingly unable to get food and provisions in North America, would eventually kind of get tired of the fight and sue for peace. The other aspect of it was diplomatic, and in kind of two folds. One was aimed at Great Britain. The idea that if they could show that the army couldn't necessarily outright defeat the British Army, but could cause them enough headaches, then Parliament, which already had a number of people sympathetic to the American cause in it, would eventually kind of force King George to stop the war and negotiate a settlement. And the other diplomatic angle being with those other countries, with France and Spain and the Netherlands especially, but especially with France, who was the other kind of major empire, major European empire of the period. And it was a lot of kind of deft diplomacy by Benjamin Franklin and John Adams and others, along with kind of a crucial military victory at Saratoga, which brought the French into the war. And that not only added troop strength to the North American theater, but it made Britain defend its empire all across the world. And so the French began striking British Caribbean islands. They began prepping for an invasion of Ireland and potentially an invasion of Britain itself. And so it forced Britain to kind of reconsider the conflict, not just as suppressing a rebellion, but as fighting kind of a worldwide imperial war, in addition to the Continental Army.
Yeah, and most people know about Washington, Jefferson, Madison. You mentioned Franklin and Adams, but who are some of the other key figures who helped shape this young nation?
Sure. I think A couple of really, names that people might know but might not know why, are people like John Dickinson. Dickinson, it's hard to overstate his importance, especially in the early periods of the Revolution. In the 1760s, under a pseudonym of the Pennsylvania Farmer, he wrote several kind of widely published tracts repudiating Parliament's right to tax the colonies without representation and proposing a kind of negotiated solution, a kind of Atlantic Parliament or representation for the colonies. He also drafted at the very last moment in 1775 what we now call the Olive Branch Petition, which was essentially a document the Continental Congress sent to George III listing their demands and saying kind of, we're willing to have peace, but if we don't hear something from you, if we don't, have any movement on Parliament's end, we're going to go to war. Another figure that I think deserves a lot more recognition, especially nowadays, is George Mason. Mason was a Virginian, a planter, a neighbor of George Washington, a prominent lawyer. And he drafted, he had a hand in drafting Virginia's first constitution, but his main contribution was the Virginia Declaration of Rights. And it was the first kind of articulation of fundamental rights that were guaranteed to Americans and to all humankind. This is in kind of late 75, early 76. So I'd say Dickinson, Mason, and a lot of these early revolutionaries. The third and final name I'll mention is Samuel Adams. We tend to think of him as just kind of a guy on a beer bottle now, and actually it's Paul Revere on the beer bottle. It's not even Samuel Adams. But he was crucial in organizing the resistance in Boston. He was the mastermind of the Boston Tea Party and a lot of that kind of early resistance that spurred the colonists to armed resistance. In fact, it's one of the factors that caused the outbreak of violence at Lexington and Concord was an order to arrest Samuel Adams and his co-conspirator John Hancock in April of 1775 that sent troops out to Concord.
Yeah. Despite various interpretations and the addition of amendments, how or why has the Constitution survived over 200 years?
I think really because of its flexibility. It allows different states to govern, for the most part, kind of based on the interests of their population. Aside from the Bill of Rights and future amendments, it doesn't really spell out doctrinaire things or kind of how states or counties or towns or even anything should be run. It guarantees each state a Republican form of government. It guarantees representation of free people, and this is amended in the Civil War to include all people and to abolish slavery. And it creates this framework by which there's a strong national government which can pursue things like defense of the country, diplomacy, internal policing and taxation, but also which leaves certain elements to local governments. And I think, it's kind of that sweet spot between kind of the British system, which is that kind of overarching parliament, and kind of what the Americans were fighting for in the Revolution, which was more local autonomy, more freedom for kind of local towns and counties and states.
I know you teach some courses. Do you find students are interested in the time period, or they not know much about it when they come to class?
Both. My class on Revolutionary America is consistently the best enrolled of any of the classes I teach. This past year I actually had a waiting list for the first time on that. I feel like, and it's one of the classes that gets the most diverse student body. I mean, most of my classes, it's a lot of history majors, education majors, people who are pursuing this field. And in my Revolution class, it's a lot of people from all angles of the university, right? We got engineering, business, ag, people like that. So I find there's tremendous interest, but the students don't come in with a very clear picture. They come in knowing certain things about the founding fathers. They know, maybe a couple of battles in the Revolution. They might have read about George Washington or Benjamin Franklin or watched some of the excellent kind of PBS documentaries that are out about these things. But they don't come in really with, and I find that they end up surprised by just how messy the time period was and how complex it was.
Well, we are out of time. So with your book, if people want to get a copy of your book, where can they go?
Pretty much anywhere books are sold. They have copies at the Barnes & Noble in Fargo, I believe also at Zambras downtown, and always kind of on the Pennsylvania University Press website or the Jeff Bezos company that, I don't know if I should mention.
Well, anyway, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
All right. Stay tuned. There is more to come. Blue Red Roses from Battle Lake, Minnesota craft melody-laden hooks with an organic groove and nostalgic sound. Mary and Dan Olson collaborate in their songwriting process, and their chemistry on stage is genuine and inviting.
Is going strong, holding out for a little something, taking on the town, hit the humps where the ghosts go dancing, dark days are gone, I'm undecided, there's no right or wrong, no sight, no blindness, is it the other way around? Out of controls never felt so frightening. You and I, we've been getting dizzy. Stop spinning. Let's walk off the world tonight. Walk off the world tonight. You and I, we've been getting dizzy. Stop spinning. Let's walk off the world tonight. Let's walk off the world tonight. Look down the alley. I can't escape from the advertisement. The cell is vibrating. My soul's becoming more dependent. Dark days are gone, replaced by viral moments. Hold up your phones. Do you feel united? I can't find my way around. Out of controls never felt so frightening. You and I, we've been getting dizzy. Stop spinning. Let's walk off the world tonight. Walk off the world tonight. You and I, we've been getting dizzy. Stop spinning. Let's walk off the world tonight. Let's walk off the world tonight. Let's walk off the It's a part of who I am now. You say it's a matter of time that I'll find a way to live a new life. I don't wanna lose it now. I don't wanna lose it now. I don't wanna lose hope. I don't wanna live in doubt. I don't wanna give it up. It's a part of who I am now. You say it's a matter of time, and I'll find a way to live a new life. I don't wanna lose it now. No, I don't wanna lose it now. I won't lose hope. I know I'm the one to figure it out. I won't lose hope. I know I'm the one to figure it out. I won't lose hope. I know I'm the one to figure it out. I won't lose hope. I know I'm the one to figure it out. I don't wanna lose it. I don't wanna lose it now. I'm not gonna give it up. It's a part of who I am now. You say it's a matter of time, and I'll find a way to live a new life. But I don't wanna lose it now. No, I don't wanna lose it
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. And by the members of Prairie Public.